Good morning, good morning. You can tell that spring has arrived because even the friendly starling here is making a lot of noise. And look at me, just like in the garden, especially after a winter like the one we had, when it was cold for a long time, the snow lingered, and now in a short period everything has to be done. So everywhere there are some cut things, cut clematis, cut grasses, pruned hydrangeas, and thicker branches trimmed, because I also sometimes cut those thicker branches in the spring. And today, since I couldn't do it earlier because there was a lot of frost and snow, today I'll be pruning the Wisteria, also known as glycine, and pruning this butterfly bush here. Dawids, because it has to change its place, since this year my mini vineyard will be here, so we're changing the location. And this is a good time to prune it and dig it up before it starts to release its sap. We'll start this episode, my dear friends, by pruning the Wisteria, also known as glycine. It's a vine that many people consider to be a very expansive climber, and that's true, which is why it requires constant pruning. You often write to me on Instagram, Hubert Lamansky, saying that your wisteria hasn't bloomed or produced flowers for 3 years. Sometimes that's the case because, first of all, it has to grow a little bit with us. It needs to settle in a bit, and only after a few years does it start to bloom. But most often it's that you're afraid to use this, meaning the pruner. Wisteria really requires multiple prunings during the season. Here I am by a wisteria that wasn't pruned last year in the fall. It was only pruned twice during the season, in the spring and mid-season, around June, and later in September it wasn't pruned anymore, and that's how it grew. But before I start pruning it and tell you what to do to make it bloom, I'll show you one that was pruned in the fall and how it looks now. This wisteria, my dear friends, was pruned 3 times last year, in the spring, in June, and in the fall. So look, it doesn't have such long shoots as the other one, although it still put out some thin new growth here and there. But the main thing is that it's already been cut back, and that allows me to control its size. Because, as I said last year, in last year's episode, I'd like to make it into an umbrella shape. It fits perfectly into my grid from the diagram here because it creates this umbrella-like shape. That's why I take such good care of it, and a wisteria pruned like this will bloom better. In a moment I'll show you step by step on that specimen over there how to prune it and how many buds to leave. You can count, you don't have to count, you can do it by eye, but for those who want to be more precise, I recommend checking how many buds there are. Wisteria is truly the queen in many gardens, but also a bit of a terrorist. Why? Because it doesn't forgive if you don't take care of it. During the season, its long shoots, the so-called whips, grow really vigorously, 3 to 4 meters in a season. These are exactly those big long branches. They are usually thin because before they gain mass, buds grow on them, and those are mainly leaf buds. Therefore, if we want the wisteria to bloom, we have to prune them in such a way that they gain volume, and so that in the following seasons they form flower buds. And first of all, if we have a wisteria that wasn't pruned in late summer, we need to cut off all those long shoots. We prune them after the second or third bud, the second or third one, as you prefer, without leaving those side shoots too long, because those shoots are supposed to get stronger. Another thing, we actually cut out all the so-called suckers, meaning the ones that grow from the bottom, the really long ones. They're usually even longer and have buds spaced very far apart, let's say every 15-8 inches. Because they grow so vigorously, they don't produce buds more densely, and what we want is for the buds to be densely arranged on those shoots. So I'm getting to work to cut out all those unnecessary branches. But before I start, I want to tell you to remember to use clean tools. And if you go to the next plant, whatever it is, whether it's Wisteria or Buddleia, which I'll talk about in a moment, it's a good idea to clean the pruner, disinfect it, so you don't transfer diseases from one plant to another. I'm getting to work because there's quite a lot of pruning to do, and I should also mention that if there are any broken branches, of course we trim them. Listen, I've basically finished pruning the bottom. I'm working my way up from the bottom because for the upper shoots I have to use a ladder. But I wanted to show you what all the fuss is really about. The buds should be set very close to each other, so if we regularly shorten these shoots, they'll start to wake up and produce buds more densely. If the growth is very vigorous, then the buds, like on this branch, we have a bud here and a bud here on this side, so they're set about 10, even up to 15 centimeters apart. However, here on this short shoot, which was previously cut, we have buds spaced about 2.5 to 3 centimeters apart. And that's exactly the point, that we want to create a base of short shoots that will have densely spaced buds. These buds, because the ones that are more swollen and not flat are flower buds, while the flat buds are just leaf buds. However, that doesn't mean that if we prune them properly, flower buds can't later develop from them. And then our wisteria will bloom. I'm getting to work now because I have to prune the whole top from a ladder. And in the meantime, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel. Let me know if you have wisteria and if you prune it regularly, because maybe there are some people who just leave their wisteria and it still blooms beautifully, but I suspect that's more common with older plants. In a moment, we'll move on to the second plant that it's time to prune, the Buddleia, and I'll also tell you what I'm going to do with this Buddleia. So here I am by the Buddleia, which is right next to the terrace. The story of this Buddleia is that I planted it 2 seasons ago, right here. It started as a small plant and has grown a lot. Actually, last year we pruned it together very low, about here, and this year we'll do the same because, as you can see, it grew about 1.5 meters of new shoots and bloomed really well. But there's one problem, it can't stay here. It needs to be transplanted, so besides pruning it in the spring, now is also the right time to transplant it. And why transplant it? Well, that's how it is in the garden. Hubert Lemansky came up with the idea that I feel a bit sorry for this southern exposure by the Italian flower bed and for this Italian flower bed to be a real Italian flower bed. What's missing here is grapevines, so grapes will be planted here to make use of this sunny exposure. And the Buddleia can't stay here because it will block the way. So in a moment I'll cut it, I'll tell you how, and then I'll transplant it to another place. This shrub, as I mentioned, isn't very old, so pruning it will be simple. If you have an older shrub, check if you need to cut out some of the 3 or 4-year-old shoots from the center or any dried ones, because that's also a bit of maintenance to let some air into the middle. That's not the case here because this is only its 3rd pruning, and as you can see, last year it was pruned here, leaving basically 2 or 3 nodes, and it grew beautifully just from those highest ones. So here you can see whether it makes sense to leave those shoots longer, because in reality, from the buds below, if you leave 3 or 4 pairs, nothing really grows from them, only the top ones actually sprout. So the shorter we prune in this case, the better. Despite the 20-degree frost, look, the leaves are still green all the time, and in fact they've already started to wake up a little. So it's already time to prune this Buddleia. It's just that Buddleia, as everyone knows, is a plant that's less resistant to frost. That's what everyone thinks, but as you can see, it's not true. So prune it when it's sunny, when there are no frosts, when there's no moisture, so that the moisture doesn't get deeper into the plant through those cuts. And like last year, look, I actually leave just one bud because it will handle it just fine. Here for these thicker ones, I think I need to use a different, stronger pruner. However, I cut it about a centimeter above the live bud so it can dry out calmly and not dry out the buds themselves. And it's from this that those long, beautiful flowering shoots will later grow. In the meantime, I'll have to repot it, so keep your fingers crossed that it takes root, because it's not very big yet, so it shouldn't be a problem, but I'd still like to repot it. Another important thing, listen, all these small branches, just like with hydrangeas, if they're coming out from the bottom, you should clean them off. Don't leave them. It should actually be left only in this way. And don't worry that it's invasive, because there's also information online that this is a very invasive plant. Yes, it is quite, and if you take care of it, it works beautifully. And my question is, have you ever seen it self-seed, or if you have Buddleias, have you seen new seedlings appear anywhere? There are some people who have seen it, but I've had Buddleias in my garden for many seasons, different kinds, both large and small, and I haven't seen them self-seed, so just a little bit. So it's not like it's that invasive either. And that's it. Well, it's quite a bit of pruning, so to speak. It's basically been stripped bare, but that's exactly the point. With Buddleias, we leave 1 or 2 pairs of these nodes. That's exactly where it will grow so much from. Such pruning makes the plant healthier, first of all, because we cut out the branches that are dried out. Secondly, it stimulates the plant to produce super long shoots. And thirdly, it prevents this. Actually, the lower part isn't bare, because you often say, oh, my Buddleia is so empty at the bottom, it doesn't put out any shoots there. That's because it's not pruned properly. If you prune it here, it will thicken up nicely. Last year, I showed how to make a Buddleia so that it's a bit higher from the bottom, so there's some space underneath it. You can also plant something underneath as an option. Take a look at last season's videos, I'll link them, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed for your spring pruning. It turned out that we have to do all of this within 2 or 3 weeks because the long winter made us stay inside for so long. I'm keeping my fingers crossed, and I encourage us to build the whole gardening community together. And the next episode will be a real challenge because I'll show you how to prune a huge, beautiful climbing rose because it's the right time for that too. I invite you and see you next time.